welcome to Living One. I'm Olivia Crossman, your host. Living One is a monthly webinar series in which presenters from around the world share their vision for a future where all Earth beings live as one community in peace, dignity, and freedom. We ask the question, we know what's wrong, but what does right look like? This fall marked the beginning of Living One's 4th year, but today these conversations are more important than ever. For they are more than conversations. They are opportunities to build community, salve for the isolating wounds of our time. Today, we have the 5th session of our winter series, Animal Trauma-Responsive Care and Alternative Medicine. Continuing over the next 2 weeks, we will hear the perspective of 2 individuals who have dedicated their lives to animal psychological and physical healing as they share their experiences and the transformative nature of this work. We are delighted to have you join us as we explore this important topic together. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various different Indigenous lands. I am currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Krulo Center for Nonviolence, located in Southern Oregon, is also the homelands of the grizzly bear, Takelma, and gray wolf. To recognize the land is to recognize the lasting effects of colonization, genocide, and oppression that still impact Indigenous communities today. But it is also an expression of gratitude and appreciation for the land and for all those whose homelands we live and work on. In the 5th of this 6-part series, we welcome Caroline Ingraham. Caroline is a leading expert in the field of animal self-medication and the founder of Applied Zoopharmacognosy and the Ingraham method of individualized medicine. She is an author, lecturer, and teacher with 38 plus years of experience in self-medication and aromatic medicine. Her work plays an important role in animal welfare and encompasses an understanding of ethology, pharmacokinetics, and pharmacology in combination with animal self-medication. Carolyn works with domestic animals as well as a wide range of other species, including kangaroos, polar bears, brown bears, elephants, tigers, rhinoceroses, and human primates. Her work has been featured in many journals and magazines, and she is the author of numerous books on animal self-medication. Carolyn has appeared on the BBC, ITV, BBC Radio 4, National Geographic TV, and the Hay Festival of Literature and Arts, as well as being in demand globally as a consultant and teacher, speaking regularly at international symposiums. She lectures to veterinarians, animal nurses, animal professionals, and university students around the world, as well as with individuals with companion animals, so that they are able to forge new lines of communication using self-medicative techniques with the animals in their care. Before we begin, let me share a few logistical notes. Caroline will be speaking for 45 minutes, after which we will have 15 minutes for question and answer. In order to proceed in a timely manner, we do ask that you please send your questions along in the chat during Caroline's presentation, and we will read them out after she's finished. For anyone who isn't familiar with the Zoom chat function, if you move your cursor towards the bottom of your screen, you will see a number of icons appear, one of which is the chat function towards the center left of your screen. If you click on that, the chat will appear where you can type any questions or comments as we go. We do have 2 members of the Krulos community here with us today, Jenny and Diksha, who will be monitoring the chat throughout our time together. Also, please note that this Zoom session will be recorded, so if you would feel more comfortable leaving your camera off or changing your Zoom name, please feel free to do so. Finally, we ask that unless you are currently speaking, you keep your microphone muted to avoid any unintended interruptions. So, without further ado, we welcome Caroline Ingraham.
Well, thank you for inviting me to talk here today. It's such an honor. You know, the work you do is really needed. And, you know, I'm so pleased to be able to have a voice and share with you how we can help using this method of applied zoopharmacognosy, animal self-medication, to help animal species on this planet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Caroline. We're so excited to talk with you. To start off, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and your arc, how you got to where you are today?
Okay, it's been a long journey. So I began in my early 20s. So that was, 38, 39, maybe, about 38 years ago, around there, 39 years ago. And I began by studying essential oils, and I was so amazed to see, used correctly, how profound they can be with bringing health back to the body. And luckily, I trained in the early days before there was any red tape. There was no rules on internal, there was no rules on anything really. So I really got to explore how to work with the oils to get the greatest benefit. And this then led me onto seeing if I could get the same results with a dog that I rescued, which I did. And then I found myself in California, because I married an American, and I researched what horses selected for various problems. And it was incredible, the information that I was collating. So I noticed that if there was an inflammatory condition that was to do with anything itis, like colitis or laminitis, then they would select oils, essential oils such as German chamomile. If the condition, if the inflammation was to do with wounds, then they would select anti-inflammatories such as yarrow, and it was very precise. And if the condition, if they had musculoskeletal pain, then they would select remedies such as birch or wintergreen. Now, taking this one step further, not only did they select from a range of remedies that were presented to them that matched their condition, they also knew their dosing. So while some horses may just prefer to inhale the remedies, getting those tiny little aromatic particles into their blood through inhalation, others wanted to or needed to take remedies by mouth. And it would really depend on the individual, their condition, and the severity of their condition. So if a horse, should I say, wanted to take that particular remedy, if they needed it very quickly into their blood, they would use the underneath of their tongue, which is rich in its vascular supply, whereas that same horse may have selected another remedy that they use the top and the bottom. It might be 4 licks with the top, 2 licks with the bottom. And another horse, or the same horse, may just use the top of the tongue with another remedy. So they really knew not only how much, but also the speed it was going, they needed it into their system. Now, this then took me onto an incredible case with my dog, who got bitten by a rattlesnake. And I had no idea what the symptoms of a rattlesnake bite were. And he was only a year-old German Shepherd dog. And his neck was out here. And I thought, whoa, what's going on with his neck? So rushed him off to the vet. Healthy dog, blood counts of around 200. Got him to the vet. It was 70. And then they put him on antivenom all night. And in the morning, the vet called up and said, can't really do, there's nothing more we can do because he hasn't responded to the drip. And he's dying, basically. Do you want to leave him or take him home? His blood count had dropped to 45 by the morning. And of course, I'm going to take him home and I'm going to see if I can help him. Now, there's 2 choices: to help him live or to help him pass on. And to help him pass on, then it'd be working with remedies such as frankincense and ones to take fear away from that individual. But he was young. But the problem with my dog, Gunner, was that I couldn't use self-selection because he was losing consciousness and blood was coming out of his nose. So I had to take the information from the horses. And if there was vascular damage, then horses very often selected wild carrot seed. So I made a capsule. I thought, I've got nothing to lose, he's dying. And I didn't want it to irritate his throat, the essential oil. So I put some vegetable oil into the capsule and I managed to get him to swallow it. almost immediately, the blood coming out of his nose went to a slow drip. It was amazing. Now, 4 hours later, it began to pick up again. Not as bad as the onset. So did the same thing, did this through the night. Each time, the improvement was greater and greater. And by the morning, he was still alive, and actually he was staggering around the kitchen. And I knew, he was going to make it because he had survived the night. He was now up, he was conscious, and it took him 3 days for full recovery. I put that on my website, and other people had the same. They took my information and applied it when their dogs had been bitten by rattlesnakes, and they got the same results. And then I researched to say, well, what animals in the wild select carrot seed? And I noticed, I found that the starlings in North America, they go out of their way to line their nests with aromatic leaves. Now, when scientists took the aromatic leaves away, they had more mites, but when they took just the carrot seed leaves away, they had lower hemoglobin levels, suggesting greater blood loss. So I then went to a scientific conference in England, and I said, what was going on with the carrot seed? Was it coagulating the blood? Or was it its effect on the liver? And they said it's actually the carotol in the carrot seed that is affecting the liver, but it was immediate, that it's producing healthy blood cells. So then my journey, after a lot more research, took me to Africa. And that's where my heart was really stolen. And I found myself at the Sheldrick Trust, working with a young elephant who had lost his mother. His name was Shimba. And Shimba was found suckling from his mother, who had died of starvation because her trunk had been severed by a trap, and she couldn't feed herself. As a result, Shimba was very reclusive, and he found it difficult to bond with both humans or other elephants. I've got a really short 1-minute clip of Shimba working with the oils, if you'd like to see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
That sounds wonderful.
Well, what I want you to notice, which you might miss initially, because I've got a little bit on film here, is that when I first begin, he is actually working with his mouth, just inhaling neroli essential oil, which a lot of animals select when there's been loss or separation. And then I go on to offer another oil that is rejected. So just so you can see the working with and the rejection. The next part of my self-medication journey began in Africa when I worked with an orphaned elephant called Shimba. Shimba's mother had died of starvation due to her trunk being severed in a trap. When I met Shimba, he had been at the trust for a couple of months, but he was a reclusive little chap. He kept himself to himself, and he didn't really seem to join in with the herd or bond to people. So Daphne Sheldrick asked if there was anything I could offer him to help him cope with the loss of his mother. After Shimba selected Angelica root, followed by neroli, he completely came out of his shell and wanted to sit on my lap and became incredibly affectionate towards me. Lucky I got strong legs. And I think one of your questions was if it's species specific and how they select the remedies.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. It's beautiful to hear you talk about their self-selection of what it is they need in that moment. And I was curious if that changes across species, or if your approach changes across species.
It does, and it really depends on the enzymatic physiology. But then from there, and it's sort of broken down into herbivore, omnivore, and carnivore. So it's much more likely that the herbivore is going to take plant remedies by mouth, and it's very unlikely that the carnivore will. So it's not to do with size. So the large cat, the snow leopard, the tiger will work by inhalation because that suits how they work with plants in the wild. They don't take a lot of plant material, so they're not going to have the enzymes to break them down. So a small amount through inhalation, kind of think of it like a gas, will go a long way. Whereas a herbivore is more than capable of breaking down the remedies, and it really depends on the individual and their condition and the severity of the condition as to how much and which oils they're going to take by mouth. I mean, usually if the condition is a bacterial infection, like I've got a video that I'm going to show at the end of the slide, where Sinia, who is struggling with not only possible septicemia, but also possible Klebsiella pneumonia, she's taking between 2 and 5 mils of undiluted garlic a day. You have to have an enormous amount of trust to be able to allow the elephant to work with what he needed. Now, the remedies did save his life. It was confirmed by the vet. If I had taken charge and thought, oh, do you know, I'm a bit worried, garlic's really strong, I think I'm only going to give Sinia 1 mil. And she needed on some days 2 mils. On the days she was cleaned, she needed 5 mils, which is a lot. And you'll see on the film that if I'm not getting it in her mouth quickly enough, she'll get my hand and she'll put it so I'm dropping it onto her tongue. And my eyes are streaming because garlic is so strong. And her eyes, if you look at her eyes, they're soft as she's taking in the garlic. And she only wanted it for as long as the condition was a problem to her. And once she had, once there was no further, she was healed basically from the condition. There was no further interest in the garlic. But if I had sort of thought, oh, I'm going to give her 5 mils a day, that would have been too much because she didn't need 5 mils every day. So I would have put her body under stress. Because like any other medicine, which they are, the body treats essential oils like medicine, they're secondary compounds. They're broken down as soon as they enter the body to be excreted, which is not like food, which can be stored as fat. If I had sort of guessed, how do I know what her dose is? I don't know what her dose is. She knows what her dose is. And if I give her too much, I'm going to put her body under stress. If I don't give her enough, I'm not going to get there. But this way, using the principles of self-selection, where you take the human out of it, and really you also take the ego out of it, because it's not really about you. Your job as the human is to facilitate the animal to find out, how can I help you? Give them the dignity to allow them to know their dose, which they do. I've been doing this, as I said, for 37 years. And the amount of studies I have where animals have successfully brought themselves back to health is incredible, but it's because it's handing it over. And it's innate. It's all mediated by taste and smell. And I always say to people, if a caterpillar can self-medicate, then other species are very likely to self-medicate too. There's a lot of research, academic research on caterpillars self-medicating. If they're infected with fly larvae, then they change their foraging from lupus to plants rich in iridoid glucosides. But if they're infected with wasp larvae, so there's not a huge difference where the wasp or the fly lays its eggs in the caterpillar, they change their foraging to plants rich in alkaloids, toxic alkaloids. But they don't harm the caterpillar because they're working with a problem. A healthy caterpillar, they'll be detrimental. And as soon as the fly larvae has died inside them, they go back to foraging on lupus or, the plants they were normally foraging on. So, if that isn't built for a survival mechanism within the caterpillar, then hopefully it will give people confidence that all animals have this incredible survival mechanism that hasn't been diluted by domestication, because it's such a strong survival mechanism. It's needed for the survival of the species. So providing that plant has been in the animal's evolutionary history, and essential oil-bearing plants are some of the oldest on the planet. They were around before the continents divided. All animals can recognize essential oils. Where it all goes wrong is when they're around plants that haven't been in the evolutionary history of the ancestors. So, like plants from the tropics where the ancestors never evolved, and perhaps they came on the planet after the continents divided. And so there's an explanation, which if anybody can challenge me with any questions afterwards, why an animal would poison themselves. And believe me, I've had to study this for years to really validate self-medication. I can show people so many animals who have brought themselves back into health, but the question will be, why do animals poison themselves? So, and there was a 10-year study in 5 different European countries that actually researched dogs, cats, and horses. And actually, out of all the poisonings, only 3.9% were to do with plants. And of that 3.9%, which isn't a lot, 95% were to do with houseplants that have come from the tropics, where the animal's ancestors have never evolved. So they don't have the detection or detoxification mechanisms to be able to recognize these plants. I mean, it's an incredible subject. It's exciting. It's just want to really tell the world about it. So what can be achieved. It's difficult to believe it, though, very often, until you actually see it. And then when you see it, sometimes it's also difficult to believe, so.
Absolutely. It sounds like it would be just breathtaking watching it unfold in front of your eyes like this. I mean, it's incredible just to hear about it. But would you say that so with your method, the Ingraham method of self-medication, when did you create that? Has that always been your philosophy? Did that develop with all of these experiences that you're talking about? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, because I think about that. I think, when did I figure out that self-medication was so important?
Yeah.
And, it was in the, 1980s that I was sort of looking into this. And I think it's when I was working with it myself. And I was, in my early 20s, I suffered from cystitis. Always look at a glass of wine, cystitis, coffee, cystitis, you name it. And antibiotics were taking longer and longer to work. And my very first lecture, I had Tisserand actually as the teacher, and I said, sorry, can't stay. I've got to go and get antibiotics. If I don't, I end up in hospital because it extends to my kidneys. And he said, oh, actually, jump up on the table. So I did, massage table. And he selected 3 oils and massaged them on my back. And it was like somebody erasing the pain. And I was actually quite skeptical. I didn't quite know why I was on this course, actually. I just thought I'd do something healthy. And I thought, was that him? Is he the healer, or was it the oils? But I came in the next day, and he said, how are you feeling? And I said, yeah, okay. But I felt the pain was off my back, but I knew the infection was still there. And he said, thank goodness. He said, put 2 drops of juniper in hot water and drink it. And I thought, wow, this tastes beautiful. And I drank it, and the cystitis lifted. And I didn't have cystitis again until I was 45. And I was in my early 20s. And through that time, I drank wine, gone through stress, like divorce, you name it, and cystitis never returned. And but what I noticed was that when I didn't need it, the juniper didn't taste nice, and it didn't smell as nice. And then my father had diverticulitis, and I thought, I'm going to see if this works for you. And he was going to have part of his colon removed. And I went by taste and smell. It was peppermint and lavender, and that he responded to. And his colon repaired itself, and he didn't need it removed. And again, he went with taste and smell. And I think it was from there that it all began, really.
Oh, that's amazing. That's incredible.
Did that answer your question?
What was that?
Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely. So taste and smell, you'd say, are pillars of your personal method.
Yeah, and also that it's now becoming recognized in the industry, so to speak. And there's been many theories to self-medication. There's been social learning. There's been I suddenly got a blank now on the other learnings. There's social learning, there's hedonic feedback, there's different sort of social theories that have been put out there. But the innate theory is the newest one. And there's a guy called Professor Jack Rhodes, who's actually done a lot of research on the monarch butterflies, self-medicating. And he also promotes the innate theory. So so it's nice to meet other people in the industry, especially when they're a professor writing a book on the subject, which is coming out pretty soon, I think. It's going to be a popular science book on self-medication, that we both have the same. It's got to be innate, because newborns can self-select efficiently, and there's nobody to teach the animals I'm with self-medication. They know exactly what they need. It's not taught, or there's no mimicking involved.
Absolutely, that's incredible. And would you say, you mentioned how with using this method with animals that it involves taking the ego out of the process? Is that the same when working with your own, like diagnosing yourself, treating yourself, or other humans?
Yes, I think just I think what I try and do is just be very present. And sort of it's just the main focus is really, how can I help you? What, but it's not, it's more about them, if that makes sense. It's not about me saying you've got to, I think you need this. I think you can only have 5 oils because you might not lose, you might not be able to smell more than 5. Don't make your mind up for the animal. Ask the animal, do you want more than 5 oils? Or do you just want 1 oil? There is no number.
Yeah.
And we tend to want to put things in little boxes. So yeah, it's and that's where we kind of go wrong with this, is when we think we know best and just losing the trust in the animals. So I've written a course that hopes to instill trust that animals really do know how to self-medicate.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And it sounds like over the years, you've seen a lot of developments with this. I mean, even just talking about this new theory that's coming out in a book. Would you maybe tell us a little bit, for anyone who doesn't know, just like what zoopharmacognosy, what it is, how you've seen the field develop over all these years?
Okay, it's zoopharmacognosy is a composite of 3 Greek words. Okay, so it's zoo, animal, pharma, like pharmacy, cognosy, the mind. It's actually the study of animals self-medicating. So we've got Professor Hoffman, who also in the 1980s has done a lot of work on primates in the wild self-medicating, and it's been quite slow, the lead up to this. Then it became then there began to be research on farm animals self-medicating, now mainly with the accent or the interest in parasitic and antibiotic resistance. So most of the research is with parasites, because they're looking for other avenues, because animals are becoming resistant, and the same with antibiotics. So it's caught on a lot more recently. Before lockdown, I spent 4 years just traveling the world, sort of suitcase packed, then back again, just trying to spread the word as far and wide as I could, and just give that information to people that, hey, we can alleviate so much suffering if we understand this concept of why this behavior is like it is. Why is this animal really grouchy? Why is this animal fearful? And it's why are they fearful of thunderstorms? And a healthy animal usually would be quite resilient with thunderstorms. It's usually when there's an underlying health problem that isn't always obvious. And we all know that, we know people who may look very healthy, and you're very surprised when you think, oh God, you suffer from migraines or TMJ, you're in constant pain with what? Better pain in your back, we never noticed. And sometimes we don't notice. It could be in the reproductive area. If we can't see it, we often think it's not a problem. But the way animals can often communicate to us that there is a problem is by their behavior. And how do we communicate too? If there's a problem with us, our behavior changes. We might get a bit more grouchy or withdrawn, or our behavior definitely changes with specific illnesses. When I had cystitis, for example, I found I was much more withdrawn. But if I have a flu, I would put myself more, I want to be loved. We have there seems to be a different emotion that very often goes with a different behavior. And so through an animal's behavior, the first question is, are you okay? Is there something going on that we don't know about? And so you can, with your repertoire of different remedies, you can offer some remedies for the gut. Is a problem with the gut? Or, not really going for those. So let's try liver. If it's a dog, do they get anxious in the car? Okay, maybe they're feeling car sick. Are they more anxious going around windy roads? Maybe the liver needs support. Or is it musculoskeletal? Is there something going along the spine? Has the tail been docked? And most dogs with docked tails will experience pain going along the spine for most of their life, which will probably drive them mad, like it would us. So it's finding out by what they select. We can find out so much information. Is it a bacterial infection? Is it a fungal infection? Are they selecting antifungal oils?
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. And I know you have some videos that really illustrate that. Would you like to show any of those?
Yeah, okay. So you have choices here. Okay, I can either do well, shall I talk about let me do the primates next, and then I'm going to talk about Ranger, who was the most aggressive tiger in the zoo community, and how inhalation, which goes to your question about species, because it was just inhalation. Or maybe I'll talk about Ranger first.
Absolutely.
And then I'll go to the primates who were in solitary confinement because they abused themselves. So they self-harmed themselves. So I'll do that one next, and then I'll talk about the bears.
Perfect.
And then we can have questions, unless you've got any more questions.
That sounds great. Sounds great.
So Ranger. Ranger was a tiger, a Siberian tiger, so an endangered species, that was brought over from Germany, and she was the most aggressive tiger known in the zoo community. So the problem was, if any man got anywhere near her enclosure, she would hurl herself against it, injure herself, and it was getting to be really problematic. And she was only 3 years old. They couldn't get her in her little sort of hut to clean the enclosure out either, because if she went in there, she would throw her body against the sides of the enclosures and injure herself. So she was going to be euthanized, which is huge for an endangered species. Anyway, I was at a scientific conference on smell, and he said, if your work's so impressive, see what you can do with Ronja. So I went along to see her, and she was in, it's called the Wild Heritage Foundation. And he just left me with her, a little fence between us, and had dents in the fence where she had hurtled herself against it. And normally when I'm working with domestic animals, I take the information by and large from the wild animals and what they select. In this case, I took the information from the domestic cat. So these cats who get bad press with essential oils then shouldn't have used correctly, these cats helped me save Ronja's life. So basically, Ronja selected various remedies, and it was quite incredible. She chose 3 remedies. She would go really close to them, open her vomeronasal organ, walk away, come back, walk away, come back, until she got a dose. At the end of the day, when one of the guys walked past the enclosure, nothing. So they were blown away. However, she wouldn't go into her enclosure still. So I came back 5 days later, and I did it slightly differently. I put the oils on pieces of cloth, more of a selection opposed to a plank of wood, around the enclosure. And she would go up to the oils, and this time it's an open gate. So she's taking in the remedies through her mouth, which is quite a strong dose opposed to her nose. And she would do half of her enclosure and back for more, opposed to 3 steps. She went into her little hut, and they put the chains down. Normally, if she heard the chains going down, she would rush out. She stayed in. So that went down. And normally, if this happened, because they put her food in there to try and get her used to it, but if they did catch her and managed to get her in, she would again hurtle herself against the sides of the enclosure. So they looked through the little window, and she was laying down in her bed. And I thought, my God, so he opened the side door. There's a little path, that protected path that goes down the side. And he said, she began to roar. And she did this several times. Every time he tried, she began to roar. And then eventually he said, look, let's leave it here. We're at a really good place. She's laying down in her bed. And I said, no, let's take it a step further. So I got all of his favorite oils, and all of Ronja's favorite oils, and put them over him, hemp on the legs and rose and so on and so forth on the arms, frankincense on the chest. He opened the door, nothing. He walked straight in, sat cross-legged in front of him, and she opened an eye. And I do this technique quite a lot, where you're changing the perception through smell of that individual. So he didn't smell like a human. He didn't smell like a man, perhaps. And so she felt good. These are the oils that were making her feel good. Anyway, I wanted to put her in my book. So I asked for permission for a photo, and said, look, can I use one of the ones I took there? And they said, hey, we can do better than that. And can I share my screen with you again?
Oh, wow.
She has 3 cubs. So here we have an endangered species who was going to be destroyed, has now been able to breed in captivity. And there's 4 of them now, 3 cubs and Ronjas. And that was just inhalation alone.
Wow.
So it's pretty impressive what can be achieved with enrichment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, beautiful.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I saw the photo that she'd had 3 cubs.
She looks so peaceful.
Yes, exactly. A completely different tiger, and she was.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So that's Ronja. Now, primates. I'll talk a little bit about the 2 primates I worked with.
These rhesus monkeys had been in solitary confinement for 6 years due to past traumatic stress. If they saw people, or even other primates, they would self-harm. For example, Kai would bite himself, including his testicles, and cause quite severe injury. When they were previously introduced to each other, they displayed extreme aggression. I had a primatologist with us, as well as a camera crew, so the situation for them was even more challenging. This is Daisy, who's terrified, and this is the male, Kai, who continually is pacing. Initially, they were screened from each other and put in adjacent pens with the aim to slowly introduce them using aromatics and self-medication. As you can see, Daisy runs off to try and hide. Next, I'm going to spray the person who cares for the primates with aromatic waters. This will help change the human scent, offering plant aromas that evoke feel-good responses. Essential oils are now being put on the wood, and look at Kai coming really close to her. This is unheard of. Before working with him, he would have begun self-harming, which is why he had been in solitary confinement for the past 6 years. Kai is now working with individual essential oils on various pieces of cloth. If he wants to take any orally, he'll suck on the essential oil cloth. Daisy, on the other hand, is working with a lot of nutrients, especially barley grass and coconut oil. She's also working with the essential oils on pieces of cloth. Going back to Kai drank a lot of St. John's wort, around 250 mils, which Daisy had no interest in at all. To see them here like this was pretty miraculous, and it's difficult to believe how they have been for the past 6 years, up until about an hour ago. There were even cameramen around, as well as a primatologist and other spectators. This is also the first time that Daisy's been seen on the ground, relaxed, and she's never sunbathed. She then maneuvers herself to present to Kai. To sum it up, in 1 hour and 20 minutes, normal behaviours have been reinstated with aromatics and self-medication to primates who had been in solitary confinement for 6 years due to self-harming if they saw people or other primates. Now, if aromatics and self-medication can have this profound effect, then it certainly needs further investigation. The bears were in a zoo in the Czech Republic. Of course, I'm not a fan of zoos, but if they are in a zoo, and if we can help them, then we should. And I loved working with the bears. It was a family of 3. And I'd actually been asked to work with a polar bear to see what he would select for a fungal infection. And okay, so
that's incredible.
Yeah. Do you want me to do the bears now? Do you want questions and then me to do the bears? Or?
Would you prefer? We have plenty of time, so if you want to share the bear video, absolutely, we can transition to questions, or we can do that reversed if that feels better.
Okay. So the bears were in a zoo in the Czech Republic. Of course, I'm not a fan of zoos, but if they are in a zoo, and if we can help them, then we should. And I loved working with the bears. It was a family of 3. And I'd actually been asked to work with a polar bear to see what he would select for a fungal infection. And I did, but I asked if I could do a comparison with the brown bears, which is really fascinating. And I haven't got this video, which I'm just going to describe to you, but I have got another video. But the video with the brown bears, we had to get them in, which you will see, to a really stark bear enclosure that they hated. And that's where they'd have their veterinary injections and so on and so forth. But they had to be in a smaller enclosure to obviously get to them. Anyway, it took hours, well, pretty much, to coax them in. And we managed to coax them into this area. And then they began working the remedies. And the young bear wanted fennel. And fennel is used in gripe water for children, and it's very good for colic. And the female bear, she wanted a lot of hormonal supporting remedies. Now, the male bear was desperate for birch. He was so desperate, he would put his tongue out, trying to get every single molecule he could of birch. And so one of the keepers put it on his fingers, and the bear turned around. And so indicating, okay, do you want it on your back? And he wanted it all around the top of the back. And then we put some drops on the bars of the cage, and he licked every drop he could get. Whereas the other bears, no interest. He was obviously in pain. Now, I wanted to get them back out of the enclosure so I could see what they would do with things like spirulina and so on and so forth. They wouldn't leave. Eventually, and it took much longer to get them to leave the area that they normally really didn't like. Eventually, we did get them out, worked with them some more, and then it was the end of the day, and the others eventually went out. But the male bear stayed till late into the evening because he was wanting more pain relief. I mean, I had set up his enclosure with the pain relief anyway. So, but this is a little clip where I'm just spraying valerian into the air. And just so you can see how powerful valerian water is, which it basically stimulates a chemical in the brain called GABA, which helps reduce excitatory neurons. But look how powerful this is and how valuable it could be in, with veterinary medicine. If you want to keep the animal calm, let's work, while you're going to work with them, let's put them in a calm state naturally, if we can. Especially these wild animals that time and time again don't do as well with many chemicals. So hence why I was called out to work at the Sheldrick Trust. Hang on a second, because I hadn't responded to antibiotics. So, okay, this is my bears.
I also asked if I could do a self-medicative comparative with brown bears. The bears' enclosure is enriched with trees and a pond, so to get them into the space where they mostly have their vet checks was a challenge and took a bit of coaxing with their favourite food. This video demonstrates what can be achieved either from inhalation alone or licking the aromatic molecules like you can see with the male father bear. I found that aromatic enrichment gives captive animals the opportunity to use their innate sense of smell to reconnect with behaviours that are normally seen in the wild, and this has amazed many zookeepers. Valerian is a well-known sedative, and one of the ways it works is by increasing GABA, which inhibits excitatory neurons. To get them to this relaxed state was impressive, and it's also a good way to change the association of an area. Aromatic waters, they're not as potent as essential oils in waters. So, and if one can achieve that just by inhalation alone, it's a lot. It's definitely an area that I think needs more research.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. Amazing. Well, so those were the videos that you were hoping to share.
Yeah, and finally I got my long elephant one. When I say long, I think it's about 10 minutes. It's, well, I say it now about the elephant. Basically, Shimba hadn't responded to antibiotics. She had been at the Sheldrick Trust for a month, and they were concerned about septicemia because she had the worst wounds that the trust had ever come across. And they were concerned for her spine because pretty much almost see her spine. And her trunk had been mutilated by hyenas because she'd fallen into putrid well water. And on top of that, elephants that fall into putrid well water very often come down with Klebsiella pneumonia. So she was a prime candidate for this, seeing as she was so horribly wounded. And then they called me out and I said, well, yeah, I can come next week because I think I had a class and so on and so forth going on. They said, no, she's probably not going to make it till next week. You need to be on the next plane. So I packed my bags and jumped on a plane and got over there. And I got off the plane, and I wish I'd taken a photo of what it was like when I arrived, or at least filmed it. But it was a soggy, fleshy mess with flies over the wound. I was sort of taking the information from horses of how I was going to work with this. So I put yarrow, which I said at the beginning is normally selected for wounds, and if it's needed, it usually absorbs in, and it didn't. So I thought, it's not working. She was very depressed. As I said, hadn't responded to antibiotics, and they didn't want to give her any more antibiotics because they can die of E. coli in the gut and gut problems if they over-medicate these young elephants with them. And I thought, what would an elephant do in the wild? And I thought, clay, I'm sure they would get some clay. So I went and luckily I had quite a lot of green clay with me, and actually red clay. I put red clay on first, then green clay. And the vet was coming that afternoon, and he actually said, the wound looks amazing. We can cancel the anaesthetic the following day. I knew that we had a chance to save Cinia. And as you'll see through the story, within 11 days, I have a healthy elephant that I presented to the trust. And the vet did confirm that the oils had saved the elephant's life, Cinia's life. Now, the main oil that Cinia selected was garlic. She didn't want any other antibacterials. If I offered her anything else, she had to walk backwards, shake her head. She only wanted garlic essential oil, and it was keeping her alive. And I knew that, and she would take it every 4 hours. So I'd see her, first thing in the morning. I'd go out to her in the field, and then before she went to bed. Now, there was one other little elephant called Dida, who had also, were only a month old, who had also selected, who had also fallen in putrid well water. And Dida also followed me for the garlic. So when you see the film, you'll see that it's Dida and Shimba that are following me for garlic, and the other elephants have no interest. Shimba comes up for a cuddle, the one you saw at the beginning, but that's and then I ran out of garlic, which I don't know if I cover that in the film. And so I thought, well, maybe she's strong enough now. I had 25 mils, and I thought maybe she's strong enough to take another antibacterial remedy. And she wouldn't. I filled up the bottle with water once. She took that. When I did it the second time, it wasn't strong enough. She'd searched my pockets for the garlic. And then I offered her all the other antibacterial oils, no interest. Came out in the morning, she hadn't drunk her milk, and I thought, oh no, the bacteria is taking hold. I don't know if I can help her. I couldn't get any garlic. I know you may say, well, why don't you get some from Nairobi? But there's no essential oil there. There's only the capsules, which wouldn't be strong enough. It needed to be an essential oil lighter than 30 carbon atoms to get into her blood. Anyway, there was one oil I hadn't offered, and that was clove. And I went back in and I offered clove, and she put her trunk over the end of the bottle, which she would do with the garlic, and she blew out lots of black debris. And then she nudged her keeper for some milk. She didn't drink it. And then I re-offered the clove, and she again nudged her keeper for some milk, and then she did drink it. She selected clove for the next 3 days. I then got some garlic in from somebody from the UK who brought it over a pilot, and she had very little interest in the garlic anymore. And then she went off both, and she was super healthy. She wasn't fighting anything anymore. That was in 11 days.
That's incredible.
So
Wow.
that's the story that sort of goes with the film. So you've got a bit of background with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like to show that now, or would you like to do questions and then end with that?
I'm quite happy that anybody, because it's going to be recorded anyway, isn't it?
Yep.
So I think if we do some questions and answers now,
Absolutely.
unless you've got more questions, like you were concerned about climate change and plants and things like that.
Yeah. Definitely. I think we do have quite a few questions in the chat, and I want to make sure people get a chance to hear from you. So I'll move to those, and then we can, if we have time at the very end, we can circle back.
And then if people need to go and they want to see the elephant video, they can clock back on and look at the recording.
That's perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So we do some questions.
Perfect. Yes. The first one, I'm just going to read these through from the chat. We have, for humans, when do you use it? By test, by smell, or rubbing? And does it depend on the dose? I think you may have already covered this, but if you want to recap it all.
I'll try and answer them as briefly as possible so we can get as many questions, but always by smell.
Mm-hmm.
Always by smell. And so initially you pick out the remedies, and there might be initially quite a few you like. Keep re-going over, and you put like, medium, and you'll find that after 4 times you've gone through the ones you like, there will be some key remedies left. Now, talking about humans would be another talk, because it's like any other healing, medical herbalism. It's important to know the information to get it correct. So, as a blanket answer, be guided by smell. If an oil doesn't smell nice, it's not going to be doing you any good. If it smells nice, you probably need it. All of us find feces, bacteria unattractive because it's harmful. Yeah. So when people say it's the one safe oil, what are the safe oils and what are the hazardous oils? Any oil that's needed is going, like any medicine, is going to work for you. But if it's not needed, it can be detrimental. And some oils are more potent than others. So if you had something like clove when you didn't need it, opposed to rose when you didn't need it, it's going to be more difficult for the body to break that down, because it is more potent, and the chemistry within that oil means it stays in the body a little bit longer than rose anyway. So but if you go with your sense of smell, you can't go wrong.
Amazing. Our second question we have, do animals self-select movement versus rest? My horse is injured and has been put by the vet on the immobility. In my opinion, if they know how to self-medicate with plants, they should also be able to adjust their movement based on how their injury allows them to move.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think the only time it can be problematic is if they're with a herd of other horses that may cause them to run. But if their environment is calm, of course, because sometimes they need to do a little bit of movement, and sometimes even putting them on box rest is quite, it can be quite depressing. And as we know, when the immune system is down, then it takes longer to heal. And they're wise, they're smart, they're not going to this pain, they're The only time it's going to be problematic is if they're chased by another horse, or, or maybe if it's a young horse wanting to do too much. But yeah.
Absolutely. Amazing. Our next question is, hi, Caroline, the story with Simba is totally inspiring. I'd love to know if it's known why the essential oil would have such an effect, i.e. what effect the oil has on the body, interaction, etc., to cause such a change. Also, did Simba revert to solitary behavior later and need further doses, or was the first session sufficient?
It was sufficient. I think, I was there for about, I don't know, maybe about a week longer, and I would offer different remedies and he would, select them. So he seemed pretty social after that. So they all work differently depending on what oil you're working with. So, if you're working with an anti-inflammatory, it makes its way into the cell because it's fat soluble. So that actually tells the cell to inhibit the production of COX-2, which will inhibit the prostaglandins at the site of the injury. Mm-hmm. If it's, valerian or something, it's working on GABA. Rose works on adrenaline. So whereas garlic, it inhibits the protein supply in the bacteria, whereas clove inhibits the sugar supply in the bacteria. And actually, very often with resistant bacteria, the two are selected together. It's quite fascinating. So it depends, they all have different uses, but actually quite specific. Some might cover 5 key points, like peppermint spans over 5 key areas, but you kind of know by what it's selected with. If peppermint's selected with wintergreen and an anti-inflammatory, it's probably for pain, or if it's with stomach remedies, it might be for the gut. So, but yeah, it's they have specific uses.
Yeah, and this same person is wondering, there are oils such as ginger, oregano, etc., that I presume the oils are more effective because of the easy absorption of molecules into the bloodstream if inhaled, but could we feed the actual plant if we don't have access to the oil?
Yeah, it's just not going to be as potent. So, and in the wild, that's usually sufficient, because if an animal can get to the remedy, the condition will be at before we see the symptoms. Usually just the herbs are sufficient to just bring them back into homeostasis. And it depends what herbs. Some herbs are pretty potent anyway. It depends on the concentration, but the oils are very concentrated. Now, the great thing is with the oils is working with an animal either you can't get too close to, or you don't want to put it in their food, because in the food would be wrong, because you're forcing them to have something they don't need. But this way, breathing it in, or sometimes I do put them in buckets of water, they can heal themselves when they want to. So does that answer the question? I don't know if I've gone off piste.
Yes, I think so. No, that's it's just so fascinating. The more you speak about this, it's just incredible. Another person is wondering about tinctures of mushrooms. They say when dogs don't love eating them, but the extraction of fruiting bodies can help.
The extraction of
fruiting bodies.
Right. Yeah, mushrooms are big out there, just like turmeric was. Not all animals selected turmeric. Not all animals select CPD. I've tried CPD with my dog. Doesn't want it. Not suited to her. Another dog it might be suited to. So the whole thing about my work is, I guess it would be under individualized medicine. You're working with the individual, and it's not random. It's not like, fennel was great for digestive issues for my for my horse or my dog. You must give that to your horse or your dog. It's going to sort them out. It might not. They might be more suited to peppermint. It might not suit their physiology, or it might be ginger. So the whole thing is matching the remedy to the individual, and that's why it's so successful. It's not guesswork, and actually makes it easier for the facilitator, because there is no guessing involved. Watching animal behavior is and a part of ethology, to see what an animal is selecting.
Mm.
Sometimes with dogs it's very subtle, and a lot of people think, oh, that's not needed, and actually the dog's really working with it, but in a very subtle way. You've got to look at other things, behaviors. Anyway, that's another subject.
Interesting. Our next question is, when I use essential oils on my skin, actually, I'm sorry, that's not a question, that was a comment, but it is interesting. When I use essential oils on my skin after the shower, having washed my hands, my dogs often want to lick my feet, legs, or hands. I've never really paid attention to which ones.
So they probably need it.
Yeah, very interesting.
Some dogs do look at essential oils, not all, it depends on the breed. Usually breeds such as greyhounds, deerhounds, shepherds, collies work better by inhalation. They don't even really want anything topically. But often the smaller dogs, which you wouldn't think so, maybe because they've got less olfactory receptors than some of these other larger dogs, they're actually, or maybe it's to do with their physiology, but it's not unusual for them to maybe lick an oil that they want. In this case, either, I make sure if it was an undiluted oil, I'd rub my fingers together. So it's just a fragrance. You could put it in a vegetable oil, or and then if they still are desperate for more, then you can make your fingers a little damper. And you just work with them, just trust them, because they don't get it wrong. It's innate. It's hardwired into them and us. We're not going to take an essential oil we don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible. Do you think that vets will ever be trained in or recognize zoopharmacognosy? Caroline knows my dog Callie, and she has severe allergies and atopic dermatitis, and the vets can't help any further. Zoopharmacognosy and self-selection helps her so much, but the vets don't acknowledge or recognize it at all. It is so sad for our animals and all the suffering owners and animals.
I know, will it be, one day, I think it will be, of course animals can self-medicate. It's like the green clay after using it on Cinia, or the Kenyan Wildlife Service now use it. And I read about it in magazines, look what these guys are doing, and, as if it's normal common practice. I think, even if it's after my lifetime, there will be a time that people would be saying, of course animals can self-medicate. But I think when you come with something new, and something so profound, I'm not a vet. Even if I was a vet, I think it would still be challenging, because a lot of vets are into holistic practices, be it homeopathy, they get quite a hard time. And so being not a vet and presenting this information in the world we live in today can be very challenging to people. So all I can do is just present my information, present my research, and and then people will see what can be achieved. It's taken almost 40 years to get this far. And you'd think if you sort of would, show a miracle, that people would be thinking, oh my God, they'd be knocking down the door. But no, it doesn't work like that. I was quite surprised. I thought, oh, wow, really? I went to, you asked in one of my questions, sorry, just have a diverse thing, what challenges have I been through? A lot, so originally I had the veterinary establishment, this was a long time ago, trying to take down that story about Gunner and the rattlesnake. They made me take everything down, and I had to actually get a lawyer to present my case that everything I was doing was within the law. It was, I wasn't treating as such, I wasn't diagnosing, the animal was treating itself. I wasn't using veterinary medicines, I was using plant medicines. And, and he was a part of, he was an animal welfare lawyer and actually a vet as well. So I was allowed to be reinstated after that. I then slipped through the net, went to an elephant conference in, I went to an elephant conference in Thailand, and it was mainly university doctors, professors. I paid my way to get there, and I thought they'd be really excited to learn how the elephant would could heal itself with potential Klebsiella and severe wounds. And one of the professors said to me, you know, what are you talking about? And I told him, and he said, yeah, he's talking about wounds as well. And if they're lucky, it takes 3 months, if they're lucky. And I thought, wow, he's going to be really interested with what I've got to show. And it's all on film. I was the talk of the conference. They weren't happy that, and I was sort of laughed off the stage. Don't try this at home with garlic and green clay. Save the elephant's life. You know, so it has been a tough journey, you know. But now it's, you know, like I said, Professor Jacob Rhodes is now interviewing me to find out about some of my research for his book, and you know, it's staying with it. When you know how to heal, when you know how an animal can, when you know how to alleviate suffering, you can't turn your back on it. You know, you can't. You've got to just stand up strong and, you know, do the best you can.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. No, it's so inspiring. You're absolutely right. And I mean, the work that you do is so impactful, and you've helped so many individuals and find health in their life. And I'm glad to hear you're persisting, because it is so important.
Oh, well, I tell you, just going back to the question there, Karen Becker, who's quite a big American social media vet, you know, very popular. She's written the dog longevity book. She said in one of her interviews that every vet should be trained by me. As a result, I got in with the scat vet. Totally has written all this horrible stuff about me on the internet. And Karen said, "Oh, it just means you're a threat," you know. But because he was so angry that she had said that. But I think it's very unscientific to not have any dialogue with me. Ask me questions. Please do not slag me off when you haven't asked me what can be achieved, how it works, what the research is. And science, surely, is all about taking information, research, and putting that forward. Let's present it. You know, when with the RCVS, the veterinary college, I was wanting them to have dialogue with me. I wanted to talk to them and tell them, you know, how and why and what is going on. So, you know, in my naivety, perhaps, but, you know, I personally think it's very unscientific to turn one's back on such a subject without asking any questions. You know, slag me off if you want after we've spoken, but you must always speak.
Of course, absolutely. And I mean, what you say about that being just an ethic of science, it's like that, where everyone's always learning information and broadening their scope. So it's almost hard to believe, and not at all, that they would move on without even asking, wondering about it.
Maybe there's fear behind it. You know, change has fear, and I don't know, maybe if you've been taught one way, it's very difficult to think another way.
Absolutely. That seems realistic, and especially in the world today with so much fear, and health fear specifically, it seems threatening, I guess.
I know a lot of people are very afraid of natural medicines, more so than allopathic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm much more afraid of allopathic medicine than I am natural medicine. You know, if I felt right to put a little drop of lemon on my tongue or some birch on my shoulder if it hurt, you know, I wouldn't give it a second thought, because I'm attracted to it. It works within my physiology.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing how there's this fear.
There's a very strong economic reason as well.
Yes.
Can't ignore that. Yeah. Absolutely. The next person is wondering, do some animals not have the ability to self-select? I recall listening to a podcast where Carolyn was the guest, and I recall that it was mentioned that one dog was teaching the others what plants to use.
One dog was teaching. No, was it me? It doesn't sound like how I work. basically, and what podcast was it? I've done a few podcasts, but be interesting to know which one or whether something was misunderstood. Yeah, basically, because it is an aid. You know, I had this conversation with actually some academics who are interested and in the primate world, and they've said to me, well, come on, Caroline, you know, it is copy, it is mimicked, you know, it is social learning. Yes, to a certain extent for primates. So we see primates roll up Aspilia and swallow it to get rid of worms. But they also select Vernonia amygdalina as a wormer, which is known as goat killer. It's so toxic. Now, the difference is that Aspilia isn't toxic. And so you do find other primates mimicking this. You would never find a primate taking Vernonia amygdalina if it wasn't needed. And they take this plant, you know, after when worm counts are higher because it has squiterpine lactones in it. So, and there's two wormers. There's the mechanical wormer, which is non-toxic, the Aspilia, or the chemical wormer, which is the Vernonia amygdalina. So in some cases, primates are able to mimic and teach, but when it comes down to a medicinal plant, you will never find any animal select it that it's not needed. So there's no teaching involved. I like being challenged with a dog that doesn't select essential oils because usually they do. It's just about dosage. You know, sometimes it might be at a distance, but I've actually found it quite interesting also switching to look at homeopathy too. And I've seen that that my dog, for instance, will work with them in a really similar way. It's mind-blowing. I'm not a homeopath, but I am self-medicative. That's my world. So with some oils, she just breathe into the bottle very deeply and her eyes will go heavy, not oils, homeopathic remedies. With another, she'll turn her head. And if she wants it by mouth, she'll look at the bottle. And then I put a couple of drops on a saucer and she'll either take that or she'll take one or two. The first time she's ever taken more than two was the other night with rose quartz, and actually her heart, she's a very elderly dog. And I thought, whoa, you know, her heart's really giving out on her. And just felt appropriate to offer her homeopathy. And I tried oxygen homeopathy, no interest. And then when I got to the rose quartz, she was desperate for it. So we put 2 drops in a saucer. She took that. And then my husband said, well, no, that's it. And I said, no, that's a human rule, 2 drops. Let her choose. She's never, ever taken more than 2 little pills. If she wants more, she needs it. And she did. She took quite a few of them, actually. And after she'd taken them, from panting and looking quite distressed, she just went, and went into a lovely sleep. So it's fascinating.
That's incredible.
It amazed me.
That's incredible. Someone is wondering what the 5 oils you always introduce at the beginning of a session are after the nutrients.
Okay, so it's 5 oils sort of pretty much within each organ system. So be it to support the gut, the bladder, pain. So it's usually a range of 5 that they will home in on within a particular area. So if it's the gut, it's usually peppermint, fennel, ginger, German chamomile, and then the antibacterials to support the microbiome. So those are digestives. Would be the 2 most popular are garlic, with all species other than primates, including ourselves, and bitter almond, which helps inhibit E. coli. Garlic's more of an all-round antibacterial, natural, and or antimicrobial. But then it might be thyme that's needed. So those are sort of, or it might be if there's an overpopulation of yeast, then they might select oils such as lemongrass, clove, geranium, which are, so you're kind of, looking at what you're trying to get some clues beforehand of what the problem is, either by their behavior or usually dogs are fear sensitive. Will often select the kidney remedies, which are usually sandalwood, German chamomile or yarrow and bitter almond if there's an infection. It could be low grade that's not really showing up or that we don't know about, which can happen with hormone imbalance. So dogs that have been spayed may need support there. And St. John's wort. I could go on with my list, so I'm quite happy to go on. But
incredible! Oh, what a wide range of possibilities.
So that's why it's difficult to have one kit, because you don't know the problem of the animal. If you have this medicine cabinet, you've got your kit there. Your hands aren't tied. It's the weekend. There's no one around. There's no practitioner. My aim is to empower people with knowledge, and so that you're not stuck. Oh God, my dog. There's this problem. Or they've injured themselves. Okay, I get my kit. Or they've suddenly, are they coming down with an infection? Do they have diarrhea? And to empower people, I think, is really important, so that individuals not reliant on anyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially being in America, you might be in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, maybe, and it takes hours for the vet to come. And your hands are tied. You've got something to do while you're waiting for the vet. Is the horse having colic? Are they usually set peppermint or fennel or ginger?
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And from that perspective too, somebody did ask in the chat, one of the things that I was going to ask you as well about the impact of climate change on the availability of essential oils and what we'll do when the oils become either impossible to get or too expensive to buy.
I know. Do you know, that is such a good question, and it's my concern as well.
Yeah.
Already arnica, well, that is through the roof at the minute. It's almost prohibitive to buy arnica CO2 because it's just a small bottle. It's 90 quid, 90 pounds, for 15 mils. That's prohibitive. I tend to use homeopathic arnica now. And have that on standby if it's needed.
Yeah.
So I give the animal the choice, while you're working with homeopathic arnica, okay, do you want to have the more physical arnica? And carrots, I'm waiting right now on wild carrot seed, which is hugely important in my kit. So I don't know, there's some oils that there's other oils that can replace them. And the cheaper oils like birch and, that's, I think that's more readily available. But I don't know, that's a question I don't know. And it is a concern. Yeah. And also, if everybody did this work, there wouldn't be enough oils to go around, because there isn't enough plants to go around.
That's so interesting. What a perspective to have on it too. But it's so limited. It makes the impact of it even more important. Someone is wondering what the best possible oils to treat for a barking dog.
Well, big question, because it's finding out why they're barking. So that would be a whole session in itself. Are they barking because they're distressed and pain? Is it part of their breed? Has the volume been turned up? When are they barking? Is it all the time? So that would be, if it was all the time, and it is that somebody's, even if they are a breed that barks a lot, you kind of know when the volume's been turned up and it's over barking.
Yeah.
There's been more exploring to see what they're selecting.
Yeah.
It could be something that is, the areas where this work doesn't really help is, I find it really challenging if, there's anything like dogs with puppy farms, or when there is actually something, they're born, pre-set up with anxious disorders, because it's all come through in epigenetics. Because it's much easier working with something that's either happened in this lifetime, the infection, injury, or there has been a trauma. But when they're born with the problem, I find it incredibly challenging. So you've got to try and get those excitatory neurons down. You've got to try and encourage hemostasis, and dogs that have really got in the habit of biting, I also find that challenging. Give me an elephant that's about to die of an infection, I find that a lot easier than a dog that, bites.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. That
having
would
said,
pose some challenges.
yeah. Well, having said that, we saw the primate film that we saw how trauma was that this behavior was reinstated so quickly.
Yeah.
But that's something that happened in this life. It's not like they were born that way. Life did that to them. So I can help with that much more than when it's all sort of genetically predisposed.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I will read a couple more questions and then maybe we end with the video that you wanted to show and we can wrap up there.
Okay.
We have one question that to do this work, you have to be very open and aware of the environment and the being you're working on. What do you do to help ensure your state and ability to be present and mindful?
Okay, so can I say that again?
To do this work, you have to be very open and aware of the environment and the being you're working on. What do you do to help ensure your state and ability to be present and mindful?
Oh yeah, I teach that actually in one of the modules of my course. Yeah, I think you're presented with a situation, and I suppose you just try and keep just almost detached but aware. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm answering the question right. I don't know if it's when I say detached, it's not making judgments. That's what I mean. Yeah, don't make a judgment. You can think, oh, is that happening because of that?
Yeah.
But just try and keep really open-minded, which I think the question's sort of saying. Mm-hmm. And just sort of make it more about the animal than anyone else. But if you feel, oh, this horse is being kept in a stable, and I don't think it's doing him any good, then you can just say gently, is there any way he can have more turnout? So I suppose, the great thing is that somebody's come to you in the first place for help. Mm-hmm. And then it's just then when you're working with the animal, just it's you and them really. Yeah. And just trying to feel what they're saying by their reaction.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Carolyn, can I just ask a quick question and abuse my authority? Do you see that some of the remedies that you provide is also bringing the individual into a space and state where they're able to, this is kind of sometimes in the parallel with the psychotropic drugs and things like that, where it sort of moves them into a space and a state where they can kind of reorient and make decisions for themselves, even though even though the conditions may not necessarily change externally, but they're able to sort of get a pause or a space where they can kind of regroup and reorganize.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of helping them to cope with their environment. And what I find is a real turning point for people and my students and anybody who does this work, and it's really quite moving, is when you're asking the animal, so you're saying, do you want this applied topically or do you want to inhale this? And they say no, they move away, and you put the oil away. And then maybe you get the other one out. Maybe it's peppermint. Maybe they've got, or birch. They need it rubbed. You say, actually, do you want it on your sore leg? Or you might be in a little bit of aloe vera gel. And you touch onto their leg and their eyes go soft. And okay, you want it there. And so you rub around and they're pushing into you. Okay, so you want that. And then you go, maybe, do you need any down the spine? And you're watching their face to know exactly where it's needed. They close their eyes. They do exactly what we do. If we can't speak, if you've got to the right place, it's like, oh, thank you, eyes closed. If you're not quite at the right place, they don't move away, but they keep their eyes open and wait for you to get to the right place. Now, they're kind of knowing that you're taking away what they don't need and working with what they do. And suddenly there's a connection that you're listening. And so many animals aren't listened to. You hold on to them, you put the remedy on, they have no choice why would they ever communicate with you? Why, if somebody did that to me and I had no choice, I would just, you can't do anything, just accept it. But when somebody is giving me a choice and saying, do you want this? And actually I move away a bit and say, no, thanks. Okay, I'll take it away. Do you want this one? And, I've had people in tears when they've realized this communication, and then the animal begins to communicate to them. So when they've got arthritis, they might stand by the cupboard which has the birch in it, or, present themselves. So it's just so many different stories, and so many animals, we lead the way. And when they realize we're listening, it just changes the whole dimension.
That's very resonant with our last presenter. Her name is Kathleen Prasad, who does Reiki. And her big theme is really resonant with yours, which is reinstating or allowing agency. And so that in itself is perhaps one of the most potent remedies in itself.
Absolutely, because we are all equal. They have as much knowing of what they need as we do. In many respects, when you come down to plant medicines. And, obviously not for other things like surgery. But there is, we're basically, how I look at it is, we're all in a different machine that's programmed, and we have the soul, and the soul jumps into this program machine, and we all have the soul that feels and has all the emotions, but there's also the machine that also has chemical emotions, and is wired in a certain way for either human behavior or canine behavior or equine behavior. So there's it might sound a bit zany, but I believe we're all one soul, not we're all one soul, but we're all souls journeying in a different
costume,
pre-set up fleshy machine with all these chemicals, that we have to battle with. But that's another subject. So yes, the dog feels many of the emotions we feel, but they're programmed to do things in a different way. But it doesn't mean to say they're any less than us. It's just a different programming. Or the horse has their program. So it's sort of the soul, the mind, and the body, so to speak. And it's also important to remember that we're souls passing through in different costumes.
That's a central theme in the more conventional view of trauma and trauma recovery as such, or trauma healing, is that reinstatement of agency. And I think that, like you just talked about, that it creates a bridge, because animals, that's the way our culture has developed and evolved into this separation. And so just having a bridge is inclusive, even though they don't necessarily want to be part of this weird human world. That in itself, to me, seems like a real release and sort of opening up into the sense of being participatory, and again, having that sense of agency, which has been taken away implicitly and explicitly.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I know. I'm absolutely with you on that one.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Thank you, Gay, for your questions too. This is just, Caroline, this has been incredible. Your insight and everything you've shared here is just so eye-opening and inspiring, and the commitment that you have is just amazing. So thank you so much for taking all this time and talking with us and sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you everybody for being here and listening and hearing a little bit more about animal self-medication.
Yeah.
And it's so good to connect with you guys too. I just love everything about your center and what you stand for. It's just so refreshing to know that places like you exist.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. And same to you, really.
Thank you.
Next week, we have our final speaker in this series. That will be Friday, March 31st at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will be joined by Elke Reisterer, She's a certified massage therapist and registered Jin Shindo practitioner with the broad experience of having worked with humans and animals for over 30 years. As always, if you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Carullos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, do please consider donating at the link in our website, which is carullos.org. Caroline, if you would like to end showing this 10-minute video, we can do that. We can also link it into the recording, which for anyone who doesn't know, this Zoom session's been recorded, and we are going to post it to our Carullos YouTube and send everybody the link when it's up there. So we can insert it there as well if that feels better to you.
Do you think that's going to be easier?
Sure.
Unless somebody said, is there anything on, maybe see the first 3 answers on the chat and see if somebody says, yeah, that's cool, put it in the video, or no, we won't see it now.
So far, we're getting a lot of thank yous.
Oh, cool.
Carolyn, would you like to show like 3 minutes and like, is that what you're saying? And then open it up for questions?
Oh,
and then
yeah, no.
It's easy to insert in the editing process, but then you don't have to stay here the whole time if you didn't want to. But
yeah, no, I'm happy to do the whole thing now. It's just whatever. I was thinking if we just, whatever people want, if you want me to do it now and as the recording or just the recording, I'm happy to go either way. What would you like?
It looks like people would love to see it now, so we can watch it, and we will also, of course, include it in the recording of the video as well.
Okay, cool. All right. I will put this on share.
Almost a year after working with Shimba, I was contacted by the Sheldick Trust to see if I could come over to Nairobi as soon as possible to help with a little orphaned elephant called Sinia, who was found in a well on the Nairobi, Tanzania border. Now, these wells are full of putrid water with animal remnants in them. And the concern is Klebsiella pneumonia for these elephants that have fallen into these wells. When I arrived, I was met by a very depressed little elephant with the end of her trunk that had been mutilated by hyenas and a severe injury to her back from trying to get out of the well, which gave great cause for concern for her spine. Not only was she suffering physically, but also emotionally, since this 8-month-old baby elephant had lost her family. She had been at the trust for about a month, and at this point, nothing was working, so conventional medicine hadn't taken hold. So I thought, what would she do if she was in the wild? And green clay came to me as the most appropriate remedy to work with. The day after my arrival, Sinia was scheduled to have an anaesthetic to deep clean her wounds because septicemia was a concern. But she was very weak and they were concerned that she wouldn't make the anaesthetic. But septicemia was a greater concern. That afternoon, the vet came by to check on Sinia, and I wasn't sure what he was going to think about all the clay that covered a large area of her back. And he said her wounds were looking fantastic. He was so pleased with what he saw and said that we could cancel the anaesthetic. That was a huge relief because I knew now that we'd have a chance to help save Sinia. Sinia was desperate for garlic. Some days she would take 2 meals, other days 5 meals. Dida is the little elephant behind Sinia, who's only a month old. She had also been found in putrid well water, and she too followed me to self-medicate on garlic, but she only wanted to inhale it. So only the little elves who had fallen into putrid well water were following me for the garlic. This is Shimba, who you saw earlier on in the presentation, who's coming to say hello, and you can see that he's happily mixing with the other orphans. He's my buddy.
It's your friend.
Yeah.
wound cleaning that happened about every third day was incredibly stressful for Cinia because 8 guys had to put her on the ground, but it was necessary to clean the wound of necrotic tissue. I tried initially to understand why is she taking 5 meals a day after she's been cleaned. Then it dawned on me that the stress of the wound cleaning, where 8 men had to put her on the ground, would have lowered her immune system, which in turn would have allowed the bacteria to flourish.
Now she's getting suction, so the molecules are going up through the trunk to clear the airways. Now she lets me know when she wants it in her mouth, because she puts my hand in there. So that, to me, that basically says she's fighting something. It's a long hand. You can see how much she wants it, because she's not like that with the other remedies. It's almost like she wants me to get this bottle. Okay. That's what the keepers were doing. Still seems to want a lot. So she wants to sniff any. Can you see there's a lot more keenness for that than the lemon? It's sort of desperate to get my hand into her mouth. And the sucking's really hard, whereas with lemon it wasn't really that hard. So she's doing the rumbling. Gosh, I've never... She hasn't been this keen, has she, Edwin, for a long time?
Yeah.
She took so much garlic that she went through a 25ml bottle in about 9 days. Day 11, and this is only a few days after her cleaning that you saw earlier on in the presentation.
No.
People ask if she's been sedated. No, it's just she has healed so well and so quickly that she's in no pain at all.
It's actually looking great underneath.
Fantastic.
Okay, more go half off.
She doesn't seem in so much pain either.
No, she doesn't, does she? Does need to dry out a bit more, but the demarcation is good and clear.
11 days in, and the vet said had Cinia survived, at this point her wounds would have been covered in maggots. Instead, she has healthy granulation tissue, she's pain-free, and no signs of any bacterial infection. The vet confirmed that the remedies had saved Cinia's life, and as a result, the Kenyan Wildlife Service are using green clay to treat severely wounded lions, rhinos, and elephants. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you'd like to learn more on animal self-medication and essential oils and plant extracts, then you'll find details on the next slide.
Incredible, Caroline. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we definitely will still, it will be in the recording of the video, but we can make sure it's linked as well, because that is incredible and such a great note to end on.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you
you again, and hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. This has been amazing. Thank you to our whole audience, and Caroline, really, it's been incredible. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.